Good morning and welcome to The Welcome. My name is Tom and I am one of three people whose responsibility it is to do this, The Welcome. Courtney and Brad are the other two welcomers, and our job is to... What is our job? What is this? What is The Welcome? Technically speaking, it's the first few minutes at the start of Manifest where we say welcome to all of you and introduce ourselves, and we sometimes proceed to get a little bit silly, and by that I mean that we deliberately make it our goal to be silly. We love laughter, I should say, if you weren't already aware of that. Laughter is awesome, by the way, if you didn't know. Laughter, it strengthens your immune system. It can boost your mood, it diminishes pain, it can reduce stress. It's the best. It really is the best medicine, unless you have a diagnosed medical condition that requires actual medicine, in which case, take that. But also laugh. Laughter is super important. I believe it's super important. As the great comedian Steve Martin once said, you have got to laugh at least once a day. Laughter is like sunshine, and a day without sunshine is like, night. Laughter can also create shared experiences, and that was really our goal from the beginning of Manifest when we started over 6 years ago. We wanted to create a moment at the beginning of each gathering where we could all share something together, regardless of where we were coming from, what our backgrounds and experiences were, even what our beliefs were. If we could all laugh together at some small moment, it would be this shared experience and immediately bring us together in that moment, even if it was just, together in laughing at my terrible puns, which I do not apologize for and won't. But then the pandemic happened and we were no longer physically together in the same space. We were no longer able to hear each other laugh, which, if you've ever been to a funny movie in the theater, you know that funny is funnier when you are surrounded by a bunch of people all laughing at the same thing. So without being together, it's raised this question: what is the welcome now? It's still these first few minutes where we say welcome and we proceed to get a little bit silly. But in the absence of being physically together and unable to hear the deafening laughter that would usually accompany each welcome, what is the welcome now? I think, we're hoping that the welcome helps ease your way into the gathering. It's something that you can get comfortable, you'll become comfortable as you're getting ready for the rest of the gathering or the rest of the message. Hopefully have a little laugh, maybe say hi in the comments section, interact with each other, other people that are watching live. And I think for us, the welcomers, it gives us a chance now, pre-recorded, to do things that we couldn't do when we were gathering live, like a multi-scene Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song parody, or attempting to gift wrap a goat, perhaps. So while we can't all physically share that experience or laugh together at the overwhelming hilarity that myself, Courtney, and Brad produce every week, if we can at least get you to smile, then I think we've done our job. Or at least if we can get you to, roll your eyes and groan, then that is mission accomplished as well. So that's what the welcome is now. And how you're taught in school never to define a word by using that word in the definition. I just have to say that I love that I have attempted to describe the welcome by using the welcome. So you're welcome for that. Anyway, that brings me to the main part of this morning's welcome. We're interested on what you would do if you had a few minutes to do the welcome at the beginning of one of our online gatherings. Do you have an idea for some fun music video or a funny anecdote that you want to share, or maybe you've got a live animal that you want to try gift wrapping, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out to us. Let us know if there's something that you think you might want to do for welcome. This isn't a long-term commitment or anything. We just want to give some other folks an opportunity to maybe share some of their creative ideas and be part of our manifest gathering online. And sometimes it's just great to have an opportunity to do something silly as a fun way to start off our Sunday mornings online together. So let us know. In the meantime, we'll continue to try and create welcomes that are fun and enjoyable, and hopefully remind each and every one of you that while you might be at home alone by yourself or just with your immediate families, you are part of a larger gathering and with so many other people, and you definitely belong. So welcome.
Hey Manifest kids, it's Miss Shauna. I hope you've had a fantastic week. I was on my way home from work, as you can see, and I told Pastor Brad, no, we need to stop because I need to talk to our kids in front of this glorious sunshine. What a beautiful creation God has given us. And we finally have great weather that we can enjoy it in. So get out there and enjoy it. Before we talk about this week's lesson, I want to go over last week's memory verse. Does anybody remember what it is? That's right. For you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 27. See? That was easy. So this week, we're going to be talking about how we can love one another. So we are all part of the church, and all the parts play such important roles, like we talked about last week. The other amazing thing a part of the church is that we are all brothers and sisters in Christ. And we have this great opportunity that we can love one another. And not only that, we can show the love of Christ to whoever we come in contact with. Whether you're walking down a path with your dog, or whether you're at the grocery store, or with your friends in your classroom, or your teacher, or if you're online on Zoom. We can show God's love in so many different ways. Can you guys shout out a way that you can show God's love right now? You're right. So are you. And so are you. Wow, you guys are so smart and so full of love. I want you to share with your families what you just shared with me. So this week's verse is really, really cool because it talks about the love of Christ and the love of our church and how we can love one another. It comes from 1 John 4, verse 7. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Dear friends, let us love one another, because love comes from God. So it's not even on our own strength. It comes from the strength that Jesus gives us every day when we wake up. So each morning this week, I want to challenge you to wake up and ask Jesus, how can I love someone today? And equally as important, I can't wait for you to get onto HQ and do some great learning, more about how we can love each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, it's Brad again, and we have an amazing interview to enjoy again this morning that will somehow connect with these two vegetables. If you can tell me how this morning's interview connects with these two vegetables, you will win my respect. But I do have something else that I want to share with you, because today we're going to be talking to Mr. Stephen Anquist about parenting during the pandemic, how that's affected children's ministry, but just in general, what does it mean to be a parent that points their kids to Jesus? What is kingdom parenting all about? And while you're not going to win a prize for guessing the connection to these two bad boys, what I will say is this. One of the resources that Stephen and I have talked about a number of times when it comes to parenting, especially younger children, is a book called Children, Can You Hear Me? By Brad Huebert. And I want to tell you that if you've got young kids, this is an amazing book for you to consider purchasing. But this morning, the very first two people who text the word book to the number on the screen in order, the ones I received, the first two people, I will mail you or send you, deliver you, whatever, a copy of this book for free. So that's our gift to you this morning for tuning in. And now let's get to our interview. Hey, Stephen, it's really good to sit with you. Thanks for joining us for Manifest Online to share some of your wisdom today. I can hardly wait. We've been trying to get this conversation together for weeks. So before we get into how the pandemic has changed things and created unique challenges for Manifest kids, but also for parents parenting through the pandemic and hoping to lead their children, in following Jesus and all of that. Can you just remind us again what the mission of Manifest Kids is and why that's so important to you and to the kids?
Sure, yeah. It's good to be here with you and talk through these things as well. I think it was, a year ago or 2 years ago, we sat down as leadership teams for the different areas and different ministry areas of Manifest, and I kind of talked through what is the mission. I think you had a different term for it, something like Queen Bee role or something like that.
Right, yeah.
What's the critical thing that we have to make sure we're doing, or everything else kind of falls apart.
Yeah, one thing we cannot not do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything still falls under the mission of Manifest, to help make fully devoted followers of God and that kind of thing. But we as a kids team kind of talked about and came up with the mission for Manifest Kids as defined to be to tell Jesus stories to kids so that they will tell Jesus stories to others.
Mm.
So we have to make sure that we do that, even if everything else kind of were to fall away for whatever reason. We have to make sure that we're passing on those stories, the stories of the faith, the stories of Jesus, who he was, who he is, how he influences and impacts our lives, and what kind of relationship he wants with us. We have to pass that on to kids, and in such a way that they are then equipped and able to and want to and have the passion to turn around and do that same thing for their families, for their schoolmates, for their neighborhood, whatever that means or looks like, to kind of replicate in that way. And so that was what we kind of came up with as how we define this is the critical piece, the critical mission of Manifest Kids was to share Jesus stories with kids, so that they share Jesus stories with others. That's awesome.
Now, I love that, because one, it's pointing to Jesus. Number two, the metric for success is clear, and that is, are the kids telling the stories, right? Like, if they're not repeating them, then we got work to do. And then that's also something which is what we want to talk about today, parenting through the pandemic in particular. That's also something parents can join us in. In fact, they're not joining us, right? We're joining them in their role. So as obviously we've been talking about how the pandemic has shifted and changed things in all kinds of ways that are concerning. Some of them are exciting. I don't think many things have been impacted in the church like sphere more than children's ministry or kids ministry, because we've been able to move lots of other things in different ways online, but like kids, that's a tough one. So when you think about how some of those changes are shaking out for, let's say, kids ministry, and here I mean in general, that's not necessarily Manifest, just in general, just kids ministry in general, what's been shaped, or like what the pandemic, how has it affected us? What are you excited about? What are you concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely changed what we do. I mean, before we were raising up and training volunteers to help facilitate a kids ministry that would happen alongside the adult ministry, I'll call it, to do that telling of stories. And everything we did was in person. Everything we did was tangible and often experiential and things like that. It's hard to translate that into online. How do you do crafts? How do you especially if it was intended to be alongside the adult service. That's not really easy to do. It's not feasible to run, for a lot of people, a kids stream alongside the adult stream and then expect parents to be the volunteers who are helping make the craft, cut up the craft, answer kids' questions, refocus them, all that kind of thing. But they're supposed to be watching the adult. And so then do we go, is this an additional thing? And now church becomes something twice as long. This is for the adult portion, this is for the kid portion. And so it's completely changed that, and made it, kind of thrown that out the window. And in some ways, that's a great thing, because I look at it and go, I don't know if what we've created as children's ministry. I mean, you've talked about the thing, and we'll talk about that more in a bit, but the thing we've made children's ministry in churches, I don't know if that aligns perfectly with what the biblical model for raising kids and passing on the faith is actually supposed to look like. And I think we'll talk about that more in a bit, but there's some exciting things, because I believe that mission that we just spoke about, the telling kids Jesus stories so that they tell others Jesus stories, that doesn't go away. I've thought about this, and the pandemic took away a lot. We can't meet together, we can't do a lot of things, but that doesn't all of a sudden take that mission away and go, well, that doesn't fit anymore, it doesn't work anymore. It's still just as real. It's just looking at, well, how do we do that now? What looks different now, and how can we achieve that? And so I think by exploring how we can do that, leads us to what I believe is a more biblical model, more the way God intended for faith to be passed on from generation to generation. And I'm excited about the possibilities there. And yeah, I think, I'm excited about that.
Given the massive curveball that you were thrown, I mean, in this kind of, in some ways, the biggest ministry we had for Manifest in terms of the organized, the programmatic stuff, was Manifest Kids by a long shot. Like teams of teams and all kinds of stuff. And then now everything's kind of fallen on you, and then on secondarily to my Shauna. But I just want to say, like, you guys need to know that Stephen, like, throughout this has said, I want to be a familiar face for the kids. Everything's turning in turmoil, and you guys have done such an exceptional job, just being that familiar face, reassuring them, telling them it's okay that things are hard. And so I feel like, even though we've switched kind of curriculums kind of halfway through, you're still that face, and you're still that Mr. Steve. And I actually look forward to Mr. Steven. You got some things to say to me. I know I'm not the only adult who said, hey, that was really important for me. So I think you and I have talked about, Stephen, how, and you alluded to it already, maybe you want to just poke that a little bit, just how the old model, or the organized model of children's ministry, doesn't really line up in many ways. Maybe in some ways it does, but in many ways doesn't line up with the biblical model. We'll get into the biblical model in a second, but
sure.
What do you think we lose, or what was broken with the old model, where you kind of send your kids off to this thing? Even though it was good. Well, you guys did a fantastic job of it, obviously.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that I'm a big proponent of age-appropriate teaching, and reaching kids where they're at. And so there are different developmental levels, different learning styles, those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying, okay, everybody needs to sit in rows and listen to, the pastor drone on and talking with big theological words that nobody understands, let alone, a 4-year-old kind of thing.
Right.
So there are things that worked really well. I mean, you talked about that when you were talking about the thing. It was created for a reason. It wasn't just done by accident or anything. It's just kind of that cycle. It turns toxic and kind of going, So what we've done is siloed off or outsourced our children's spiritual development. And this makes sense because we do it everywhere in society. If you want your kid to learn to play the piano, you sign them up for piano lessons and let a professional piano teacher teach your kids to play piano. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. You do that. So if you want your kid to play soccer, you put them in on a soccer team and soccer lessons, and the soccer coach teaches them to play soccer, or, you know, an instrument or a language, or we'll go and send them to the professionals to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. But the natural instinct then becomes, well, if I want my kid to know God, well, who's the professionals that are going to teach them about God? And I don't think that was the intention. I don't think God went, here, I'm going to pick the few people who are the professionals that are going to teach you and teach your children about God. That was a role that God set up for parents and families to explore and learn and grow together. So, and the church hasn't done the best job at reinforcing that either. We've taken on that mantle and often went, we are the professionals. We know what's best. We know how to do this right. We know the right and the wrong, and we will pass it on. You shouldn't try. So it's been twofold in that way. I heard somebody say once, family seems to be so important to a lot of believers, and family is important to God. And yet what we've created in our churches, specifically in a lot of North American settings, is we can get up in the morning on Sunday morning, get into the minivan, kids can put on their headphones and watch a screen, can walk into church, sign them into the kids ministry area, the adult goes to their service, they can meet up again to pick them up, get back in the minivan, put the headphones, and spend the whole morning and never speak to one another. And that doesn't seem right if family is important, and if faith is something that grows and is developed and built in the family. And if that's how it was intended to be. So
can we get into that? Like how do you think it was intended to be? Like you've been talking to me about, like, goes right back into the Old Testament, right? Baked into how God kind of instructed his people to handle this, right, from day one, kind of thing. So can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Sure. Yeah. I think this is really cool. If you go right back to the Old Testament, when the Israelites are heading to the Promised Land, they've just left Egypt. So they're a young nation, group of people, and they're trying to figure things out. And God's going to give them the law and the rules and things to follow, and who he is, and reveal himself to his people in that way. And he gives them clear instructions of how you're supposed to do this. And he says in here, I'll read it. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. Repeat them again and again to your children. So this is what you're supposed to do. Repeat them again and again to your children, not just to yourself, but to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you are going to bed and when you are getting up. So a parent's job in that way is to repeat the law, the rules, the things that God has done, who he is, again and again to their children, when they're on the road, when they're at home, when they're going to bed, when they're waking up. That implies all the time, wherever you are living your life. This is part of living your life. Following Jesus, following God is a way of life. It's not something else. It's not it doesn't say there, send them to the Sunday school program where they will hear about me and my laws and my rules and my love for them.
Right.
From you repeating them again and again and again.
To draw this like back to your mission, like for Manifest Kids, the what or the it becomes the Jesus stories, right? And like tell them, like as you're walking, tell them as you're doing this, talk about it on the road, talk about it on the way to swimming lessons, talk about, like, right? And so that, because Jesus is the fulfillment of that law that we're talking about, the whole culmination of this whole thing. So that's awesome. Yeah.
And if you continue to look throughout Scripture, one of the reasons that God was calling people to do that was he's like, impress this upon your kids. And what that does is reinforce that faith and that belief and stuff in you as you pass it on, as you repeat those stories, as you repeat those things again and again. It strengthens you. And he talks about, so that you don't fall away. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, you'll find out oftentimes they obviously didn't do that very well all the time, because within a generation they were off doing things away from God, and God needed to bring them back time and time again. But this was how they were supposed to do it, so that they didn't go down the wrong path.
So one of the markers of how well a generation does with this task given by God is does the next generation pick up the torch and run? Yeah.
Cool. And the other component, as you look through scripture, is how are kids involved, and how are you supposed to pass on the faith to children and stuff like that. They're together. There doesn't seem to be this separation the way that we've kind of created in church a lot of ways. And again, I believe in age appropriate teaching. So I'm not saying we need to completely put everybody together all the time. That's
But if that's all the kids are getting, is the 1 hour on Sunday, just like it is for adults. Like if that's all we're getting,
But I mean, like anywhere you look where the people of God are gathered, you can read between the lines. Kids are probably there. When Ezra's reading to the people after they built, and they're all crying out and mourning because they realize they haven't been following God. Children were present and seeing that grief and that pain and living it. And that is profound, because they get to see their parents crying and in pain, and they get to go, well, why, and understand that and talk about that. And that there's something real about that faith there. Then when Jesus was feeding the 5,000, children were present in that number and getting to see that miracle and see that.
Well, it's a little kid's lunch. It's a kid's lunch, right? How does he feel about that story? He was telling that to his grandchildren. I guarantee it.
Yeah, exactly. So kids are present with whatever's going on, not just the fluffy, easy stuff, but the hard stuff. So even as we live our lives, are we doing it together as a family? And when there's difficult things that are going on, are we struggling together? Are we celebrating together? Are we doing that life together as a family?
So you think we compartmentalize a lot of our family stuff, right? So that's not something the kids are they don't need to be part of that. So like, we're going to work this out. The big people are talking.
Sometimes we have a tendency I think we have a tendency to do that. I know that I have a tendency to do that. Faith has often become a personal thing and a private thing. And it is to a certain degree, but how are we supposed to pass that on? If it's the way I'm living my life, then it should permeate everything, and it shouldn't be something that's private and personal only that I hide away, or when the difficult things come, I'm not going to talk to my kids about it because they don't need to be burdened with it. Well, world and life isn't always perfect and easy, and I need to equip them to understand and know how to deal with this. And because we have Jesus, because he's here, they have something, someone they can turn to deal with the difficult things. It's not hopeless.
No. I've seen this in you too. I mean, I was telling you this just earlier, right? I've appreciated how you walk along the road with your kids and incorporate faith into so many different moments. So I recall stories about, your boys coming home, having a hard day, and you processing it with them, or had a bad dream, or, them kind of learning how to pray for others, that kind of thing. So like, let's say one of your boys comes to you, he's had a bad dream, let's say, like, because this is something that parents like actually will face, right? Or they've had a bad day, or they've had like, what kind of stuff do you do? Like, how do you walk along the road with them in that moment?
That's a good question. It's talking about what they're thinking and feeling with them, and having a conversation, stopping whatever I maybe want to be doing, or if it's a bad dream, it's sometimes waking me up in the middle of the night and just go back to bed. So and I appreciate you complimenting me, but there's times where I wish I could, I'm like,
Sure.
oh, I wish I did that more. You make it sound like that I do that really well all the time, and I certainly don't. But it's taking that time to talk to them and point them to Jesus, because he's there with them.
Right.
And taking the time to pray with them, not just going, it's okay, it's just a dream, go to sleep.
Yeah.
No, that's an opportunity. That's a moment where Jesus is with us, and he can speak to us, and he can protect them, and he can help them deal with those things. And how can I point my kids to that and to Jesus?
Yeah.
So with dreams specifically, for example, we'll talk about the dream. I mean, if it's 3 a.m, we might talk about it the next day.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about it. What was your dream? What was going on? And they'll describe it. And then I've gotten in the habit of asking, where was Jesus in that bad dream? And sometimes they'll close their eyes and go back into the dream and look, oh, there he is. And then I ask, what is he doing? What is he saying? And oftentimes they will go, oh, he's now, there's a big monster or snake that's attacking me or whatever. And now Jesus he's reaching his hand out to me and picking me up, or he's stepped on the snake, or he punched him, or, that kind of thing. And he's holding me now. And then everything is okay. And that's what I want to develop in my kids, so that they know they can do that on their own. And they have. Jack has described to me, I had a bad dream last night, and he didn't come into my room to wake me up. And I said, oh, and he tells me about it, and he says, but then I remembered that Jesus is there, and I asked him to help me, and he did. And then I was able to go back to sleep.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then this is the kind of thing, I mean, you can do, I mean, we did this too when our kids were younger. You have a bad day. Can we talk with Jesus about that? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm so mad at someone. And Jesus, what we would do is like, Jesus, what would you like, Noah to know right now about the situation, right? Yeah. Where are you? Or what's like that question? Like, could you show him what's the truth about this, right? Yeah. I feel so alone, or I feel, what's the truth? Like, and just inviting Jesus into that. It's not like and this is all experimental, right? Like, it's not like you've got the handbook, page 658.
No.
Like, it's just, let's try stuff. And pointing to Jesus is never a bad thing. So,
yeah. I find one of the things that we have to do then, if we're going to ask Jesus that question, if we're going to pray and ask, what do you want our kids to know, or where were you, or that kind of thing, we have to listen at that point. We have to stop and actually listen for him to respond, and assume that he will, and assume that he is speaking to your kids, even if it sounds like you're just imagining this or making this up. Okay, I'm going to assume that Jesus is here, and he can use their imaginations and meet them on the top of a lollipop, or, in the middle of a dream where he punches things, or why not? And what is the truth that's in there, and explore that with them, rather than, no, you're just dreaming that, you're just imagining that, that's pretend. Don't we can shut that down. And yet I think we can learn so much from our kids, and some of the ways that they experience and are hearing and seeing Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so huge. That again gets back to why repeat it again and again, because it makes it alive in you, and as you listen to your kids, it can strengthen your faith. And I want to encourage parents, and so much, that it's like, you don't have to have this faith thing, this Jesus walk thing all figured out before you're allowed to pass it on. You don't have to become the expert. You don't have to be a pastor in order to have these kinds of conversations with your kids. You can be a brand new believer and walking with your kids, but I know nothing. That's great. You get to walk together with your child and learn these things together, and you're probably going to learn things from your kids. There's a reason that Jesus said, like, I love this. Somebody pointed this out to me, that Jesus is described in the Gospels only 2 times as being angry. And one of them is when the disciples kept the kids from coming to him.
Yeah.
The gospel writers made it clear. They knew that Jesus was ticked off at them, and wrote it down, says he was angry at us because we didn't let them come. And then he picked them up and said, the kingdom of God belongs to these guys.
Yeah.
And there's a reason he said that, because they're, in a lot of ways, get it a lot easier. It's accepted that, well, of course God is speaking to me. Of course there's a God. Of course he's going to help me. Of course that's easier for them. As we get older, we become more cynical and think through things. Go, well, maybe, well, and that's great. That's part of maturing. But there's things we can learn from that childlike faith that is huge. So we can learn from one another as we do life together, and we're doing things as a family and sharing that walk and that journey together wherever we go.
Now this is the walk along the road stuff, the do life happen stuff. You were talking as well about adding some intentionality to it. And I don't mean like immediately some parents will think, oh, rigidly, like, a special, like a routine that we cannot break. And that's not what we're talking about here. But you used another example from the Old Testament I thought was compelling as well. And then how you unpack it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There's another passage that has always resonated with me. It's when the Israelites with Joshua are crossing. It's another separating the water and crossing. It happened twice. You might not realize that, but they crossed the Jordan. And God tells them this time when they cross, he tells Joshua, says, pick 12 guys, one from each tribe, to go back onto the dry riverbed and pick up 12 stones and bring them over here beside the water and set them up as a memorial. So Joshua tells the people to do that. And then he tells them before, as they're doing it, set them up here as a memorial so that when your kids ask you, you can tell them the story of how God led you across and how what God did for you. And so it wasn't if they ask, it wasn't maybe if this inspires something, then great. It was when they ask. So there's an intentionality to set this up so that you are asked the question.
Yes.
So I take that and go, what are the 12 stones in my family's journey? What are the things that we set up intentionally that are going to provoke the question from my kids? And then so that gets you thinking, what are they? What are the 12 stones? What are the stories that I want my kids to be asking about? Do I know when they ask? Do I know how to answer? Do I know how to tell them the story? And then do they know them well enough to be able to tell them again too? Or are we repeating them and coming back to them again and again? That the passage actually in Deuteronomy that we talked about earlier, where it says talking about walking along and when you're sleeping and when you're waking up, continues to talk about, imprint them on your foreheads and tie them to your wrist and put them on your doorposts, all these things. So there's there's something about the tangible that was so important to their culture that I sometimes we lose because we don't want to create an idol. We're so afraid that we're going to start worshiping the 12 stones that we don't even want to have anything to do with that. So we've swung completely the other way and have nothing. In our churches, we have a cross and we sometimes do communion, but a lot of the other symbols that some traditions have, we've shied away from them. And then where is those intentional things that provoke the questions from the next generation and from the new believers and things to go, well, why do we do that? Let me tell you. So translating that into families, it's like, what are those stories that are important and pivotal to your family's journey and walk? Do your kids know your story of how you came to follow Jesus? What does that look like? Do they know to ask that? Are they asking about that? Do they know, those are the kinds of stories that, are you just keeping that to yourself and it's private, or it's, you think it's too mature or I don't know. I'm thinking myself, I don't know if I've told my kids about my own journey that way, but that's part of my story. That's part of our story of where we've come from, where we're going. And those are the things that we need to be passing on and doing it together.
If I'm sitting here and I'm going, I haven't been following Jesus long enough, or like, I don't know if I can think of any stories of miracles or like, where does someone start?
We have a book that are full of them. We have the Bible that is full of stories, and we can share those. And are we sharing those, or are we just hoping that they'll pick them up at church for that 1 hour that we have, or maybe some videos or apps or things that we have, which are great. Like those are fantastic, but are we sharing them? Are we living them out?
But Stephen, I can't just open my Bible with my kids and just read them a Bible story, can I? Like,
sure.
Yes, you can.
Why
right?
not?
Of course.
Yeah. I mean,
it's back to that whole professionals, leave it to the professionals thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many resources out there, and I know sometimes that can be overwhelming. Like I don't know where to start and where to begin. And so like there's you can find some great kid Bibles that will have things. The one that we used with the boys growing up was the Jesus Storybook Bible, which is fantastic. It goes all the way through the key kind of stories of the Bible, but always point to Jesus. And how realizing that the whole Bible is one big connected story that all points to Jesus and his mission. And even me reading that to them, I learned things. This is written for kids, and I'm like,
totally,
oh, I didn't realize that was pointing to Jesus. I didn't realize that this was all connected that way. Nobody ever connected those dots for me, and yet now I'm able to share that with my kids. But you're right. You can open the Bible and read it together and read it to them. I'm blown away. My kids want every night to read from their Bibles, just their normal Bibles, not a kid's Bible, no pictures in it. It's just words, and it's confusing. And I've wondered why. Like sometimes I don't think you're understanding. I barely understand as I'm reading it to you, but if I say, well, do you want to read something else? Or if I kind of shy away, they're like, no, we want to do this. We that kind of thing. And it's been an opportunity to have conversations, because they ask questions. But what does that mean? And sometimes it's simple little things like, what does that word mean? Because it's a word that is weird.
Totally.
And we can talk about that. But sometimes it's bigger things. Like Jack wanted to read through Judges for some reason. Yep, Judges. We're reading through Judges. I'm like, okay, we'll read through Judges. And chapter 8, want to read through Judges. He didn't like it, but we still had to read through it. He didn't like all the killing, and he didn't like the violence. And he's like, I don't like this. And it led to really difficult questions like, why is there so much killing? Why is this okay with God? Why is he telling them to do that? Why is this? And I don't know if I have the answers.
Right.
So if I then go, I don't have the answers, so I don't want to talk about this. I'm not equipped, so I'm not even going to bother reading this to them. Then where does it go? Am I going to then go take some training? Probably not. But if we explore it together and we realize that God is with us, that God is speaking to our children, and he's speaking to us, and he's speaking through his word, then we can read his word, and he will be there with us and help us to understand it if we take the time to listen and we explore it together. So, I mean, I've talked about that before on some of our little things with kids, but
keep that up for sure. That's awesome.
So I just want to say one last thing before we wrap up here is that I don't want any parents who are listening to this to feel guilt or shame that, oh, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing enough, I need to be doing more, and I'm exhausted, I'm depressed, I have no idea where to start, I don't know how to do this. I want to dispel that that's a lie, that shame and that guilt is a lie that's from the enemy, and I want to call that out right now, and I want to encourage you that you're doing a great job. If you can take one step and walk with your kids, and it doesn't have to be, well, now I'm a Sunday school teacher and all that kind of thing. That's what I want to encourage you, because you're doing awesome. You love your kids, and that's amazing, and that's the first step. And that's so important. And then I also just want to just quickly say, anybody who's listening who's not a parent or who has adult children who've moved on, I don't want you to think, oh, this wasn't for me, I can kind of check out, and good for you, parents. We have the opportunity always to be leaning in and sharing Jesus stories with younger people that are in our lives, to be sharing people with who are younger in the faith in our lives, and being about that, because that's what strengthens our faith, is when we pass it on and we share it, and that's what makes this grow. I heard one speaker say once, he's like, I tell young people when I come across them that this is all about you. This church thing is all for you and all about you. It's not about me. I'm old. I'm done. But I love my Jesus so much. You better keep up. I'll be there to help you up when you fall down and encourage you and guide you in where you're going. But you better keep up, because I love my Jesus that much. And if we can have more people with that kind of attitude and perspective of what this journey is all about, wow, that would be incredible.
By the way, you guys, Stephen's going to share kind of tips of wisdom as he goes, kind of thing, as time goes on. So this isn't it. This fountain will keep. But Stephen, thank you so much for being willing to share your heart and encouragement for parents. This is just going to be, I know it's going to be such a helpful conversation. So I think we'll leave it at that. But thanks again. From the bottom of our hearts, oh my goodness, thank you for everything that you pour into our kids. Such a huge thing. See you later.
When the weight of life begins to fall, on the name of Jesus I will call. For I know my God is in control, and His purpose is unshakable. Doesn't matter what I feel, doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be in your promises to me. Now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be your promises to me. As I walk into the days to come, I will not forget what you've done. For you have supplied my every need, and your presence is enough for me. Doesn't matter what I feel, doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be in your promises to me. Now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be in your promises to me. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. Nothing's gonna stop the plans you made. Nothing's gonna take your love away. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. Nothing's gonna stop the plans you made. Nothing's gonna take your love away. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. Yes, you will. You will always be more than enough for me. Nothing's gonna stop the plans we made. Nothing's gonna take your love away. You will always be more than enough for me. It doesn't matter what I feel, it doesn't matter what I see. My hope will always be in your promises to me. Now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be your promises to me. Doesn't matter what I feel, doesn't matter what I see. My hope will always be in your promises to me. Now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be in your promises to me. Yeah, your promises to me. And your promises to me. In your presence, there is freedom. In your presence, there is hope. In your presence, there is healing. Love restores me. I am whole. No matter how far I run, you are with me. No matter how far I fall, your love is everlasting. Your kindness never ends. God, you never leave me. Your presence goes before us. Your glory has no end. God, you never leave me. Oh, 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 oh. In your presence, there is power. Through your spirit, strength will rise. In your presence, there is mercy. In your presence, I'm alive. No matter how far I run, you are with me. No matter how far I fall, your love is everlasting. Your kindness never ends. God, you never leave me. Your presence goes before us. Your glory has no end. God, you never leave me. You will be our guide to the end, to the end. The Lord is with me. He will not forsake me. You will be our guide to the end, to the end. The Lord is with me. He will not forsake me. Your love is everlasting. Your kindness never ends. God, you never leave me. Your presence goes before us. Your glory has no end. God, you never leave me. Oh, 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 be our guide to the end, to the end. The Lord is with me, He will not forsake me. You will be our guide to the end, to the end. The Lord is with me, He will not forsake me. Your love is everlasting, your kindness never ends. God, you never leave me. Your presence goes before us, your glory has no end. God, you never leave me. God, you never leave me. Oh, 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 oh.
Oh man, isn't Stephen a great guy? He's such a wise Jesus follower. So many of us could take advice, write a couple of pages of advice from his conversation. That was so good. Have you figured this out yet? Anybody figured this out? Come on, people. Time is ticking. We're almost to the end here. Let me just pray for you, and then we can go off into our day, go forth and parent and go out into the sunshine and enjoy life. Jesus, thank you so much for today. Thank you that we get to do this together, even though it's not ideal, it's not our first choice in how we get to gather. We choose you. We choose to prioritize you. We love you, God. Help us learn how to tell Jesus stories along the road and while we're doing laundry, and no matter what we're doing, to remind ourselves of what you've done and remind others as well, to point people to you, because Jesus, you are the way, the truth, and the life. Amen. Have an amazing day.